Before we get started, you can get my free 2.5-hour wedding photography course and all new free preset pack if you can find it. I promise, it's not that hard. A lot of us get into this business because we like taking pictures or because we want to justify our gear addiction.
I've got glass, but it's not in the cupboard. Full kit, every focal length is covered. New lens, bokeh, bokeh, bokow. Gear's worth more than my car now.
And I think most of us fall into different places on the artist to business scale. I am going to talk about that scale at the end, and if it actually even matters. Stay tuned for that. Let's begin using me as an example. I started taking pictures of my friends' bands with no desire to make any money from it. It was honestly just nice to be asked. My reward was a social one where they would actually use my images as their display photos, and that would feel like payment enough for the work that I was doing. Then everything changed. I'm kidding, it didn't change that hard. That's just YouTube over dramatics. At some point I was facing a bit of a hard challenge. I was in school for computer programming and I had a work term. I realized very quickly that I never wanted to work a 9-to-5 job after sitting at that desk for maybe 2 or 3 days. Up until that point, all of my work experience had been restaurants, long shifts on my feet, and everything else that you've probably seen in The Bear. But the thing that restaurants gave me was a flexible schedule. If I wanted a day off, it was easy enough to get someone to cover my shift. You kind of also set a rough boundary of your schedule that if you only want to work 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. certain nights a week, that's usually no problem. Now you have your entire day to do whatever you want, and then you can go out to do whatever dive bar activities the rest of the crew gets up to after you close. It wasn't all great though. Some days you'd go in, you'd make $500, and then some days you'd go in, you'd make $20. That's Vegas, baby. I'm kidding, I didn't work in Vegas. I worked at an Outback Steakhouse in Canada that went out of business. But working at a restaurant does set you up for a great life as a gambler. I mean, entrepreneur, where all of our risks are super calculated, measured all the time, and we for sure just don't do random stuff and sometimes get paid. The sliding restaurant schedule with the sometimes high amount of money was the schedule that I wanted. I did not desire to be at an office desk from 9 to 5 p.m. for a static amount of pay. I think my main issue with that was also that if my work got done faster or I subcontracted that to someone else, which I actually did for that job, I didn't get to go home any earlier. So, back to school, Billy Madison. Edit note. I had options. I was in second year college. I paid for my private pilot's license while working at Outback Steakhouse, so I was on track to be a commercial airline pilot. I was also taking a lot of pictures of bands for no money, and I was also about to be offered a very low-paying management position at Outback Steakhouse. But I had to pick a real job before I graduated, otherwise I would be deemed a failure by society. So I did what every responsible Van Wilder does and decided to go back for another program after I graduated. This time, advertising. That would buy me some time before real life. Year one was pretty much just Photoshop, a program that I'd been using since I was 12 years old. I made art and graphics for a player chart of Ultima Online when I was 12, and it was actually my first paying ongoing job. Though my first paycheck was from a company that offered to put banner ads on my GeoCities website in exchange for pennies per click. I had a pretty sick snowboarding website and I made $18. And adjusting for inflation, that is now $4,700. All this to say, I don't think that I was ever on track to do a traditional 9-to-5 job working for somebody else. And that's why I really couldn't wrap my head around the idea of getting one. Then, dramatic pause. I went on Google and I typed in what photographers make money. And I looked at a few lists, and weddings were always up there, either 1, 2, or 3 on pretty much all the lists. And it seemed a lot more fun to be a wedding photographer than whatever I would end up doing sitting at a desk out of college. So I researched it a little bit more. I should also put this in a box here. This was a few years after the industry switched from film to digital, or I guess it was kind of still going on. Wedding photography was probably the least cool type of photography that you could ever imagine. But as I looked into it more, there were some people doing some interesting stuff in the industry, and there were a few people doing destination weddings, which looked pretty cool. With my band photography, I already had a bit of a head start. I had most of the gear that I would need. I was pretty decent at off-camera flash, which was pretty much a requirement at that time because camera shooting above ISO 800 would explode. But I needed work experience and a portfolio. And you know this story. I emailed every local wedding photographer with a website that I could find, and one of them got back to me and offered to sell me some gear, and I bought that gear. Sadly, no job offers at this time. So at this point, I decided to just start building my own portfolio. I would ask friends if they would do a shoot with their partner, and I would do those sessions the exact same way I would do a band shoot. I would find the dirtiest alley possible and set up an off-camera flash for no reason. At this time, I was very much in the artist mindset, and I wanted to stick to that style that I created. Well, I fully understood that wedding photography was going to be the business. I was not going to sacrifice any of my artistic integrity in order to make it in the industry. That changed pretty quickly. I spent a few months building a small portfolio and asking friends to dress up in wedding dresses. And within those months, my style had already started to change pretty much completely. I was immersing myself into the industry and consuming as many visuals as I could, or visuals that looked like they were actually booking people work. And I figured the fastest way to start booking work was to just create work similar to those that were already getting booked. And that might sound crazy, but I wasn't wrong, and I started getting bookings pretty quickly. There were a few shoots that I did that had a dramatic impact on my bookings. The biggest one was the first time that I worked with professional models and a real proper dress shop. It was actually a workshop that I paid to go to that my friend Dave put on in Toronto. Also, side note here, we're doing an awesome workshop in Majorca in March. So if you want to come accelerate your portfolio like I did, it's already half sold out, but it's gonna be awesome. I'm gonna be there. My friend Cole's gonna be there. This is him. Back to the story. I very much created work to get booked, which sounds dangerous and counterintuitive to what you will usually hear anywhere online. I think a lot of what people were saying was that you have to find a style, and once you find a style, you become an amazing wedding photographer that gets to travel the world and have the life that you've always dreamed of. And I honestly don't know if I ever found my style or what I would consider to be a style. I did find my style of couples though, and depending on where that couple was getting married, my work would look different. I wasn't trying to bring a specific style and vision to their day, more so I was letting the couple and the venue feeling guide me. If my couple was very comfortable in front of the camera, maybe I would do a lot of that day at 35, or if I could sense that they were a bit uneasy with the idea of being in front of a camera all day, I would spend a lot more time on an 85. And this wasn't verbal things that they told me. A lot of the time people would say that we're super uncomfortable and awkward in front of the camera, and they would be the most comfortable people that I've ever photographed in front of a camera. So don't listen to your couples, I guess. Sometimes listen to your couples. To this day, I still don't think I found my style. I have some presets that change the colors up a little bit, but I don't think that I would necessarily consider that a style. I'm also curious, maybe as a general thought here, I'm curious from a client side, how often we get hired primarily because of our images, or if it's a lot more about who you are and how you're going to fit into the day, maybe with pricing also being a main consideration for most people. Weddings are a bit weird because a lot of the time you're displaying in your portfolio and in your Instagram what your couples have put together. So it's their wardrobe, their details, their friends and family. And my question is, when a potential couple comes to your website and they see a wedding and they're like, that's the exact wedding that we want to have, does it really matter how good your images are, or is the fact that you already shot this wedding that's similar to their wedding more likely to get you booked than anything else you could have done stylistically? I have more questions. Couples that are looking at 20, 30 different photographers, how do they start telling people apart and deciding who they want to book? Some couples are for sure looking for someone that is a very strong artist. I will use this man for an example here. He is an incredibly strong artist with an incredible eye, but is that why couples are booking him primarily? I'm gonna ask him this actually. Or do the great images get couples interested and they end up booking because they find out that he is the most wonderful human that they genuinely wanna hang out with on their wedding day? I'm sure all things are considered, but I would say that second part is a very, very strong closing factor. Purchasing decisions in general are very emotional, but maybe even more specific when it comes to weddings. A lot of couples will book wedding photographers because they feel right if they're interviewing 3 other people and it's like, this person feels the most right, they're our photographer. And it doesn't really come down to work all the time. At least that has been my personal experience over the past number of years in the wedding industry. Back to the topic though. Artist to business scale. I actually don't think it's a scale because they don't fight one another for value. You can be 100% in business and 100% artist also. And I don't think that they fight each other. There's also business and art, and there's also art and business. I will say though, if you are 100% pure artist with no business skills, that means you either need to learn or you need to hire somebody to manage the business side of your shop. Or on the flip side of that, if you're 100% business and 0% artist, you're probably not in the industry. So maybe there is no flip side of that. You're probably at least like starting at 20, even if you are a strong business owner that you saw an opportunity in this market. And I do know some people that have done that, I guess myself technically, but I also know one other person you've probably seen here on YouTube. When it does come down to actual bookings though, I think the scale is a lot different. I think photography skills and personality work together, that if your photo skills aren't as good as the other person that the couple is meeting with, but they get along with you way more, you're probably gonna win that booking. I think another key consideration for decision-making, either consciously or subconsciously, is trust. That if they get along with you, they trust you to actually show up on the day and do good enough work, you're probably gonna win that booking over someone else that's maybe a question mark. So while I could probably place myself right here on the artist versus business scale, I don't think that scale matters to anyone. And knowing this for sure doesn't book me more weddings. Maybe it gives me that if I know that I'm very heavily weighted to one side, that I need to focus on the other skills. And maybe for me, it goes all the way back to my first job I got when I was 12, designing art and graphics for a video game. I always had to create something that they needed, and honestly, any attempt to get too artistic was usually incorrect. Now in the wedding photography industry, I think there's something pretty interesting about being stuck in this box of your business and what the industry will mostly accept and trying to push the limits of that. I'm not the one pushing the limits. People like Fair and Sam Hurd and Two Man and many others, but I personally don't have that level of creativity as my guiding North Star, and I think that that's okay. Fortunately, in this industry, there is a place for very different photographers looking to book work and make a living that doesn't keep you at a desk 9 to 5 all day and gives you life flexibility. Photography is kind of a choose your own adventure a lot of the time, and you get to build the business that you want. And if you like the idea of actually having a 9 to 5 where you work for yourself, you're probably not going to be doing weddings, but my friend Gary Hughes runs an amazing headshot business, and it was his goal to essentially give him a day job and have evenings and weekends to spend with his family. And also, once you go down one of these pathways in photography, Gary began as a literal child doing weddings and eventually found something that was more for him and more for that specific era of his life. So if you are putting all this effort into your craft and becoming a photographer, know that you're not going to be stuck in that exact niche, that you can change things year over year and make things different and more specific to your life happiness in general. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Don't be too hard on yourself if you haven't found your style as an artist yet, because I haven't either. If you're interested in that free 2.5-hour wedding photography course and free preset pack, find it. I don't know. Where are you going to find it? It's up to you now. See you next time.